When Volume 1 of Stranger Things burst onto the scene, the show was met with tons of praise and many declaring it a return to form. The sense of apathy that surrounded the show quickly dissipated and was replaced with awe and wonder. The month between volumes was filled with tons of theory crafting and fan speculation on how the season would end. The hype surrounding the show was real, and as July 1st arrived, everyone was eager to see if the show could possibly live up to it and conclude the season in an exciting and satisfying way. I think the finale to Season 4 was an immense success, though it is not without its issues. It is chock full of meaningful character moments and intense action, which I think helps mitigate most of its problems. In this video, we will take an in-depth look at the continuation of each of the major storylines that carried over from the first volume. I will be looking at these storylines in detail, so I will be going into full spoilers. Although it does not feel quite as superfluous as it did in Volume 1, the Russia storyline is still the least relevant and has the fewest stakes. After the gang is reunited, they have to bust out of the Russian prison and look for a way to get back to America. As the plane that Joyce and Murray came in on crashed, they decided to rely on Yuri to get them out of the country. Yuri being such a main focal point doesn't do the storyline any favors, as he is easily the least likable of all the characters in Russia. After his double cross in episode 4, both the audience and the characters know that Yuri is not to be trusted, and that he would sell out anyone as long as it benefited him.
Word of warning, Jen. That man is more slippery than an eel dipped in baby oil. I wouldn't trust a word out of his mouth.
Shortly after Yuri introduces us to his lovely Katinka, it becomes more clear that he has no intention of helping the gang. He takes the time-wasting approach, removing a spark plug from the helicopter to prevent it from starting. He then proceeds to fiddle around, knowing that he is giving the gang the runaround. What's frustrating about this is that Yuri isn't just wasting the time of Hopper and company, he's wasting the audience's time, as we are forced to endure his needless shenanigans.
My woman make noise when I please them. You don't know what that is like, I understand.
He also seems content to just stall, and has little to no interest in escaping as the gang leaves him unattended so they can have a private chat. The helicopter can start at any time, and for some reason he's content to just stick around and troll Hopper. Yuri's stalling grinds the Russian subplot to a halt until they make contact with the secret agent lady. They learn about Eleven's plan to go to Hawkins and fight something in the Upside Down. With nothing better to do, they decide breaking back into the prison and risking their lives to kill the creatures who might help the kids back in Hawkins. This logic feels like a bit of a long shot and that the characters are jumping to conclusions. They have no timeline on when the fight is going down in Hawkins, so the fact that it ends up perfectly timed to save the day is a bit convenient.
And if we're lucky, it'll hurt it enough to give the kids the upper hand.
It kind of feels like the writers needed to give something for the adults to do for the finale in order to justify the time spent in Russia. However, the story is moving again, so I don't mind too much. Before they leave though, Hopper tells Enzo to get Yuri in line so that they can use the helicopter to escape the prison. This leads to a scene between Yuri and Enzo later in the episode where Enzo tries to convince Yuri to stop stalling and fix the chopper. This scene is a necessary piece to show Yuri's turn, but I find myself disinterested throughout it. Enzo tries to invoke the Yuri of old, who was apparently a war hero, which seemingly comes out of left field. I am not the least bit invested in Yuri as a character, so when they try to give him a triumphant moment when he comes in with the helicopter, I find myself not caring. That's not to say that Yuri is a bad character. I thought he had some great moments in Volume 1, but it feels like a lot to ask the audience to give a hoot about his backstory. The two actors do a good job with this scene, but throughout it I find myself anxious to get back to the more compelling storylines. With Hopper reunited with Joyce, I find their interactions throughout Volume 2 to be some of the best aspects of the Russian plot. It was great seeing the two together again, as they have some fantastic chemistry. The scene where they are talking about their date at Enzo's, and Hopper goes into incredibly specific details about the food, is definitely a highlight.
2 orders of breadsticks. 2. Those things knock your socks off. Enzo puts some spice on them. I don't know what it is, but it's good. And you dip it in olive oil, forget about it.
And honestly, Hopper deserves it. After seeing him in regular clothes, his weight loss seems even more drastic. This scene ends with the two finally kissing, which has been a long time coming.
They could have easily had us come together sooner and Jopper, but I'm glad that they waited because it really builds.
Also, I just want to mention that I really dig the new outfits, as I think the coloring of the jackets make them look like rocket pops. When they get to the prison, they come up with a plan to lure the demos into the pit area and have Murray barbecue them. Probably the best moment for me was when Joyce and Hopper were waiting to kick the plane into action, and they have a little conversation telling each other to be careful. Triggered by the similar circumstances they find themselves in, we get to see our old friend Bob again. I thought it was really interesting to see that Joyce still carries the trauma of Bob's death with her, and I found it to be a powerful moment, especially when relating to the experience to what Hopper is about to do. The chase sequence with Hopper and the Demodog was okay, but once again I knew they weren't going to kill him off, so it didn't really add any suspense for me. I was much more concerned about Max, Eddie, Steve and the gang to really pay attention to Hop almost getting eaten. After being saved by Joyce, Hopper is able to lead the demos into the pit, where Murray makes some nice barbecue. Murray is great as always, and his grilling really was the turning of the tide, as it had pretty big implications for the Hawkins crew. I think the moment worked really well despite the time inconvenience I mentioned earlier. Seeing the vines and bats drop because of the grilling felt impactful and very satisfying. One Demogorgon survived the Grillmaster's flames, and even though there was no real stakes, I really enjoyed Hopper picking up the sword and decapitating it. It was a little over the top, but it was a super fun moment that added to the epic feeling of the finale. Not necessary at all, but it felt like the cherry on top to a delicious ice cream sundae. The cheesiness that this scene exuded is the very thing that made it so great. Overall, I still think the Russia stuff was my least favorite storyline of the season, but it didn't detract too badly from my overall enjoyment of the show. Once Hopper, Joyce, and Murray separated themselves from the Yuri side of things, I think their role in the finale worked really well and provided some great entertainment, as well as some meaningful interactions between characters that have been separated for a long time.
You see this weird girl behind me? She needs a tub with a bunch of salt so we can enhance her psychic powers so she can save the world from this super bad dude.
I've combined the California and 11 storylines because they are very interconnected and talking about them together feels appropriate. In episode 8, there is a ton of meat on the bone of 11's storyline, as it starts off with her waking up after reliving her fight with 1. We see that she has regained her powers and is as ready as ever to kick some upside down butt. She finds out about 1's reemergence and what has been going down in Hawkins. Naturally, she is eager to go and help her friends. However, leaving the facility is not as easy as it seems. It was really giving me Empire Strikes Back vibes as 11 tries to leave the facility, only for Brenner to tell her that she is not ready, similar to Luke and Yoda. Brenner's reluctance to let 11 go and make her own decisions feels very possessive, and that he is treating her like his personal science project rather than her own person with agency. When he says he cares about her, I believe him. However, it's a twisted and selfish version, where he cares about what 11 means rather than who she is. In the flashbacks throughout the season, it felt like Brenner was more genuine with his interactions with the kids, but the way he's treating 11 in this episode is much more reminiscent of season 1. To him, she is a rare commodity that should be coveted and controlled. It is possible that the way he treats her after the massacre could be because he sees her as his last chance at greatness and is thus clinging on to her more desperately than before. Regardless of the reasons for his desire to keep 11 locked away, it is clear to the audience that if 11 doesn't leave, then Vecna's victory is all but guaranteed. Owen sides with 11, and just as they are getting ready to peace out, Brenner shows the lengths he is willing to go to get what he wants. He has Owens captured and locks 11 in a room with him, telling her that if she tries to leave, he will kill Owens. This then divulges into a really interesting conversation between the two. Brenner tries to justify his terrible actions, like how he brain-fried 11's mom after she tried to get her daughter back.
Your mother was sick, 11. She was a danger to herself and to others. She brought a gun into the hospital. She killed a man.
It's unclear if his weak justification is an attempt to pacify 11 or if he has truly deluded himself to the extent that he genuinely believes his actions were moral. It is also revealed in this scene that when in season 1, when 11 was searching the mindscape of the Upside Down, she was actually searching for 1. This detail is really intriguing, and I think it does a really good job of connecting the show back to its original season. It also begs the question of what would Brenner have done if he actually found 1. Brenner seemingly gets what he wants for the briefest of moments as he manages to call her 11. But his victory is short-lived as the military dude arrives on the scene, breaking into the facility and decimating its occupants. Brenner tries to escape with 11, only to get gunned down by Sniper Elite. We are then treated to a visually stunning scene of 11 toying with the helicopter before pulling it down to the ground in a glorious explosion. The scene looks fantastic, particularly when the helicopter is falling to the ground and you can see the spinning blades slice through the nearby vehicles. Before 11 escapes, Brenner releases her from the collar he had just recently put on her. I'm not entirely sure if this moment was supposed to be some small bit of redemption for Brenner, but if it was, I don't think it works. If the army hadn't attacked the base, there's no way Brenner releases her. He would have been more than content to keep her as his little science experiment. The only reason he lets her go is because the alternative is for her to be murdered by the army dudes, and it feels like he would be against that purely on the basis of the lost potential for discovery and advancement. In his dying breath, he tells 11 how she is his family, and that everything he has done has been for her. But after experiencing the love of a true family, 11 is no longer buying Brenner's lies and leaves him without acknowledging his final pleas. Now, Brenner took 3 rounds in him, the most lethal being in the chest, so he had better be dead. However, this man walked away from a Demogorgon mauling without a scratch on him, so who's to say for sure? With Eleven's Uber finally arriving, I think it's time to shift focus to the Cali crew. I know a lot of people felt that this plotline was underwhelming, and I feel similarly concerning certain aspects of it. But before I address those, I want to highlight something that I thought this storyline did really well in Volume 2, and that is its inclusion of a number of meaningful character moments. It starts out strong with the van scene between Mike and Will. Mike is in emotional distress as he is not only worried about finding Eleven, but feeling insecure about his relationship with her. When he thinks about Eleven, he sees all of her best qualities, which leads him to question why someone so great is even with him. He feels useless, like he can't help Eleven in any meaningful way, like he is good for nothing at all.
And one day she's gonna realize that I'm just some random nerd that got lucky that Superman landed on his doorstep. I mean, at least Lois Lane is an ace reporter for the Daily Planet, right? But
these insecurities make him think that soon enough, Eleven is going to realize that she is too good for him and move on to bigger and better things, leaving him alone and heartbroken. These feelings of inadequacy are the reason he hasn't let himself tell Eleven that he loves her, because he is worried that admitting that to her will only make it hurt all the more when she eventually leaves him. Once again, these thoughts feel very realistic and genuine to a teenager trying to manage their first romantic relationship. Will recognizes his friend's self-doubt and wants nothing more than to make him feel better. He empathizes with Mike, putting words to how he is feeling and saying, without explicitly saying, that he feels the same way, only about Mike, not Eleven. He tells Mike how Eleven will always need him and that without him, she feels lost and struggles. In this conversation, he is using Eleven as a surrogate to express how he is actually feeling, allowing some of his pent-up feelings to bubble to the surface.
She's been so lost without you. It's just she's so different from other people, and when you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake. But you make her feel like she's not a mistake at all, like she's better for being different.
He shows Mike the painting that he had been working on, revealing that it is of the party fighting off a three-headed dragon together. Notably, Mike is leading the group with a heart emblazoned on his shield. Will goes on to tell Mike how he is the heart of the party, and that it's his leadership and care for the others that helps propel them forward in times of crisis. The heart also doubling as an expression of Will's true feelings for his friend. After this talk, Mike feels comforted while Will breaks down, feeling even worse than before. This is likely because Mike telling Eleven how he really feels will almost certainly bring the two closer together, whereas if Will were to tell the truth to Mike, he fears what it could do to their friendship. As Will cries into his hand, Mike does a quick shoulder check before returning his focus to the painting. I've seen a lot of people hating on Mike for this, but I think his obliviousness makes sense, especially considering he is a teenage boy who himself has difficulty dealing with his emotions. However, someone a little older and a little wiser than Mike recognizes Will's sorrow. It is clear that Jonathan notices something is amiss, as he takes this info and pockets it for later. I think this scene is excellent for so many reasons, but chief among them is that it helps further develop Mike, Will, and Jonathan in a way that allows the audience to empathize and relate to how they are feeling. It is also further built upon in later scenes with Jonathan's heart-to-heart with Will and Mike's confession of love to Eleven. The Jonathan and Will scene is great in its own right, as it feels like a reset of sorts for the characters, as they haven't really had many meaningful interactions between them throughout the season. I think Jonathan is at his absolute best when he is being a big brother to Will, as it is evident how much he truly cares for him. After realizing that there is very clearly something bothering his brother, he reaches out to him and lets him know that he will love him no matter what. It is clear that Will really needed to hear these words from his brother, as his emotional stability is on the edge as he is struggling to come to terms with his sexuality as well as the stressful situation they find themselves in. Throughout the scene, it felt like Will was going to officially come out to his brother, and I kind of wish he did, as it feels like a dangling thread where it was left unsaid. However, in universe, I think it is a great thing that regardless of any suspicions he may have, Jonathan did not push Will. Instead, he let him know that whenever he is ready to finally talk, his big brother will be there and love him no matter what. During the climax of the finale, Eleven finds herself restrained after being bested by Vecna, Max's life hanging in the balance. Spurred on by Will, Mike tells Eleven everything she means to him in an impassioned speech. He tells her all the ways she is amazing and how much she has changed his life for the better. He caps it off with an admission of his love and a plea to action.
I love you for exactly who you are. You're my superhero. And I can't lose you.
This scene worked really well for me, as it feels like a great emotional payoff for Mike and Eleven's relationship this season. In a different show, the power of love being something that allows the hero to overcome their foes might not work, but for Stranger Things, I think it fits the show perfectly, as it feels like the core of the story. Argyle is even allowed to shine in Volume 2, as he leads the gang to his pizza domain. His interactions with his doppelganger are really funny, bringing back some of the whimsy which has been a staple of the show. However, it is not long after this that Argyle reveals himself to be the true villain of Season 4. Nothing Jason, Angela, Brenner, that army general dude, or even Vecna did compares to the atrocities Argyle commits. He desecrates God's greatest gift to mankind as he has the wickedness, the truly indescribable depravity to serve the kids pineapple pizza. His vileness truly knows no bounds as he forced it down the throat of his hapless victim, condemning Mike to a fate worse than any other character on the show has experienced. Pineapple on pizza, what do you think? Let me know in the comments. I think now is the time to circle back to the issues I stated that I had with the California storyline. And my main issue really boils down to the fact they didn't have much to do. Honestly, they had basically nothing to do. After they set up Eleven's bathtub, they are pretty much her glorified cheerleaders as they watch from the sidelines. And yeah, Mike did a really good job shaking his pom-poms during the love speech, but I can't help but feel like the characters were underserved. If the narrative only gave us the events from their perspective, they are pretty much just staring at a bathtub for a couple of hours with the occasional light flicker. I really thought there would be more for them to do, and it is definitely disappointing that they were essentially useless in the finale. I expected that they were somehow going to manage to get to Hawkins in time, and when it became clear that that wasn't going to happen, I figured they would still have something interesting to do, like protect Eleven from the military dudes that were still after her. Mike mentions that there's going to be people following them, but I guess not?
Oh, but right now we need to get you somewhere safe. There's gonna be people behind us. No, Mike. I
know a lot of their vehicles got trashed in the explosion, but with how bad this general dude wants Eleven dead, I would have thought he would make a few calls to search the Surfer Boy pizza establishments, considering he sees the van drive off. Ultimately, I just wish that Mike, Will, and Jonathan were more important to the plot, as they have been with the show since the very beginning and have been integral characters in previous seasons. When talking about Season 5, the Duffers have said that Will is going to play a major role, and a lot of the pairings will go back to Season 1, which will likely also place an emphasis on Mike. I really hope they deliver on that, because I think the characters are better than the limited role they were given this season.
It's only the beginning of the end.
The Hawkins storyline continues to be amazing, as it not only has a series of meaningful character moments, but it also features the most interesting and compelling plot of any of the storylines. Volume 2 in Hawkins features some of the most jaw-dropping, terrifying, tear-jerking, and significant moments of the entire show. It starts off with a bang as we jump back in with Nancy trapped in the vision by Vecna. We see Nancy running for her life as Vecna unloads his future plans on her, traumatizing her in the process. Simultaneously, we see Nancy's friends desperately searching for some music to rescue Nancy from the spell she finds herself in. This also provides us with an incredibly funny moment as Eddie finds his taste in music under fire.
Blondie, Bowie, Beatles music! We need music! This is music!
Ultimately, they don't need to find Nancy's Kate Bush equivalent, as Vecna intends on using her as a messenger. He shows her glimpses of what is to come and tells her to relay this information to Eleven before releasing her from her trance. The visions Vecna showed her massively traumatized Nancy as she saw the destruction of Hawkins with countless creatures from the Upside Down running rampant. This sets the stage perfectly for the coming episodes, as it elevates the stakes even further with the imminent destruction of the city. Even more interesting is that Nancy saw her mother, sister, and even Mike die in this vision. Steve asserts that it is merely Vecna trying to scare them, but if it is truly a glimpse of what is to come and not merely what Vecna intends to happen, then it is best to keep an eye out for Mike in Season 5. These visions do not send Nancy into a purposeless despair, instead they invigorate her with even more fervor to stop Vecna. Nancy has shown herself to be an incredibly strong and resilient character, and her unwillingness to yield in this moment only further demonstrates that. As the gang tries to process the information Nancy has given them and plan their next move, we get a fun little moment where the characters experience the same thing that the audience has been struggling with since the big reveal in episode 7.
We were wrong about Vecna. Henry. Sorry, what are we calling him now?
Vecna.
Henry. Right. We've learned something new about Vecna/Henry/1.
Coming into Volume 2, there was definitely a sense of foreboding surrounding the characters, as it felt like one or more of them could really end up dying. The fanbase was frightened for the lives of all of their favorite characters, and the show really played into that.
I have this terrible, gnawing feeling that it might not work out for us this time.
For a while in Volume 2, it felt like a race between Steve and Eddie on who could collect the most death flags. Eddie talks about his deadbeat dad and how he vowed to never be like him. Steve talks to Nancy about his hopes for the future and his desire to have a big family. Eddie bonds with Dustin and asks him to promise him that he'll never change. Steve talks about how much he has grown and confesses his love to Nancy. Eddie says he is not a hero. These two are seriously having an arms race of emotionally potent character moments in the lead up to the big fight with Vecna, amplifying the feeling of anxiety in the audience. These scenes are absolutely amazing in their own right and really help to further develop these two amazing characters. On the Eddie side of things, it helps further inform his backstory while showcasing his relationship with Dustin and his arc from coward to hero.
There will be no more retreating from Eddie the Banished.
Steve's scenes further illustrate his concern for his future, as well as acknowledging how far he has truly come since the start of the show.
I get a big enough thump on my head, I can change, you know? I can learn. I can crawl forward. Just thank you.
Thank me.
Yeah.
For
giving my head the biggest thump of its life.
I really think these scenes show the incredible character work done in this season, and they are some of my favorite scenes in Volume 2.
These moments that are surprising, that are quiet, and they're just emotional. They're just human. And again, it goes back to what I think is the key to Stranger Things, which is, yeah, we go huge, but it's always rooted in character and rooted in heart.
Max continues to be the star of Season 4, as she is the primary bait in their plan to defeat Vecna. Knowing that the plan is dependent on her making herself vulnerable to Vecna, she resolves to fight the bad memories he uses against her with her happy memories. We get a really sweet scene between Max and Lucas when discussing this, as Lucas wonders if he is part of her happiest memory. This isn't the only great scene that Max and Lucas share, as once the plan has begun and they are waiting to make contact, they have another scene where they speak through flashcards. Where Max was closed off at the beginning of the season, she is now much more open as she tells Lucas she is glad that he is with her. This is another sweet scene and really shows their growing dynamic, with Max trying to let Lucas in more and not bear everything alone like she was doing earlier. However, during their conversation, Lucas fumbles the bag hard as he dooms Max to a terrible fate when he asks her to a movie on Friday. The second I saw that, I thought, welp, something bad's gonna happen to Max, because there's no way they're gonna see that movie. Lucas should have known that making a date in the middle of a dangerous plan will always lead to disaster, and guarantee that one of them won't be around for the date. Just look at Hopper and Joyce last season after they planned to have a date at Enzo's.
What do you say, Friday, 8 o'clock?
Max definitely had some death flags before this scene, but this shot her into the stratosphere. The suspense continues to build as Vecna doesn't initially take the bait when Max offers herself up. Knowing that the entire plan hinges on her distracting Vecna, Max opens up, confessing the things she hates about herself. She talks about how Billy made her life miserable, and that she wished something bad would happen to him so that he would be out of her life. When she ultimately got her wish, she felt an intense sense of guilt for wishing something so awful on someone. Max's feelings regarding Billy are definitely complicated, and it is understandable that she would want Billy out of her life as he displayed abusive behavior towards her. However, this does not relieve Max's sense of guilt, as once Billy was dead, she began wishing that something bad would happen to her, because in her mind, she was an awful person for thinking what she did.
Now when I lie in bed at night, I pray that something will happen to me. That something terrible will happen to me.
This self-loathing is the struggle that Max had been battling with the whole season, which makes this scene all the more powerful. It also feels like Vecna's waiting is almost like his way of flavoring his kill, allowing Max's despair to bubble to the surface so that it is easier for him to use against her. The Max, Lucas, Erica squad is only one of 3 groups for the plan to defeat Vecna. The other 2 squads have their own objectives that are equally as important to ensure their victory. These squads consist of the Steve, Nancy, Robin trifecta, who's in charge of killing Vecna in his sleeping state, and the Eddie Dustin duo, whose mission is to distract the Demobats so that the trifecta has a clean shot into the Creel house. In regards to Steve, Nancy, and Robin, while I enjoyed their role in the plan, I did think that they got sidelined for too long. After waiting for the other groups to do their part, they finally got into the house, only to be trapped by the vines and choked. It feels like they're being choked out forever, as we cut back to them a couple of times in the same position. In the universe of the show, it was probably only like a minute, but in the reality of the show, it was like half an hour of them doing nothing. It would have been more interesting if they were able to fend off the vines for a little bit instead of immediately succumbing to them, but I can understand not wanting to draw focus away from the other groups.
One eternity later.
When they are eventually freed from their bonds, they confront Vecna and treat him to some Molotov cocktails before Nancy blasts him into oblivion. The Eddie Dustin side of things provides us with maybe the best scene of the entire finale, with Eddie's concert. Having Eddie jamming out to some Metallica on the roof of his trailer as a means of distraction is just such a cool and fun idea. Stranger Things has always been great at building a scene around its use of music, and this is one of the very best examples of this. The moment ramps up the tension as during Eddie's performance we cut back to Max running from Vecna and the Demobats beginning to swarm. This is a fantastic scene that really shows something unique that Eddie brings to the table. It also nails the little details like Eddie dedicating his performance to Chrissy.
Chrissy, this is from you.
Maybe the best part of the entire scene for me though comes at its conclusion with Eddie and Dustin hyping each other up that it was the best metal concert of all time.
Most metal
Max is able to evade Vecna temporarily as she manages to create a safe space in her happiest memory, the snowball dance. I think this scene is a good metaphor for depression as Max attempts to protect herself with her good memories, only for her unhappiness to start to invade it like a disease in the form of Vecna. This shows how depression can corrupt memories that we used to cherish with the horror of our present reality. Vecna eventually wears down Max's defenses and enters her memory. Right when he's about to kill Max, Eleven shows up to save the day and sends Vecna flying. This sets up a rematch between the two as Vecna and Eleven go toe to toe. Vecna proves too much for Eleven, besting her and tying her up in his red realm. Eleven tries to appeal to Vecna, telling him that Brenner is dead and that one was never actually a monster, it was Brenner. Gotta say, strongly disagree on one not being a monster. Before he even met Brenner, Henry was killing animals, tormenting his family with terrible visions, obsessing over spiders, and killed his mother and sister. Henry was a monster from the jump, and a serial killer at the age of 10. Even if Brenner mistreated him, Henry was always an evil creep that was going to kill innocents. It feels like Eleven should know this considering he told her all about it, as well as his plans for the future. In his monologue, one reveals that after his fight with Eleven, he was banished to an unknown realm. He explored this land until he found the black smoke monster, which he used his power to shape to his will. The black smoke is the essence of the hive mind and is what gives one his ability to control the upside down. The Demogorgons were minding their own business until one infected them with the smoke and turned them into his army. They are not unlike what Will was in season 2 and are likely just as unwilling in one's plan.
Who is you?
All I needed was someone to open the door.
With the reveal that Vecna is in fact the real big bad and not the Mind Flayer, I've seen some people online not in love with this idea, as the Mind Flayer had been built up since season 2. However, I actually really like the idea of Vecna being the true evil, as I think he is a more compelling opponent than the Mind Flayer. What made the Mind Flayer scary was the lack of information and its perceived animalistic nature. Because we know that Vecna is just a guy, that could potentially make him less scary. But I think Vecna being the main villain and in control of the Mind Flayer allows for the Mind Flayer build-up to be carried over to him and allows it to act as a reflection of who Vecna is on the inside. I really like the reveal and think it will only make it more compelling as we create even more questions as to how everything in the Upside Down came to be. Back with Eddie and Dustin, we see they're getting overwhelmed, leading them to retreat back to their world. Or at least, that's what they should have done.
Nobody deviates from the plan, no matter what.
After Dustin climbs through the portal, Eddie hesitates a moment before removing the mattress and cutting the escape rope, telling Dustin that he's going to buy him more time.
Stop! 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 Eddie, what are you doing?
I think it's a nice touch that Eddie was trying to protect Dustin by preventing him from being able to climb back through easily. I will say though that in relation to Eddie trying to buy more time, I understand where Eddie is coming from, but also felt like it wasn't conveyed in the most effective way. In Eddie's mind, he's trying to buy more time for Steve's gang because if they left through the portal, the bats would turn back to Vecna's house and probably kill them. However, when watching the show, it didn't feel like the extra distracting time was necessary and Eddie's decision to buy more time was the writer's excuse to kill him off. This isn't helped by the fact that after he gets knocked off his bike, he chooses to stand and fight instead of run.
If things here start to go south, I mean at all, you abort, okay? Draw the attention of the bats, keep them busy for a minute or two, we'll take care of that.
I realized that this is what his arc was leading to since the very first episode, but it felt a little forced. Eddie's running away wasn't really something I felt he needed to overcome in this specific moment, because running away meant living, whereas fighting meant dying. He could have continued to distract the bats and got away instead of fighting them. This doesn't ruin the scene for me, nor does it ruin Eddie's heroic death, but it does make it feel unnecessary and that it was only done because we needed to have a meaningful character death in the finale.
We fell in love With Eddie, we fell in love with Joe and what Joe was doing. I think everybody in the cast fell in love with him. And it was, you know, it was written, it was going to happen. And we knew he had to die, but it was just, yes, I have some there's definitely a part of me that wishes he was still around for 5, but I guess that's ultimately how you want to feel.
I don't think Stranger Things is the type of show that needs to have characters' death for the sake of them. Having all of our favorites die and the show leaving us in a depressed mess feels counterintuitive to the feel of the show. Now, it may seem like I am contradicting myself in relation to the fact that I think Hopper should have stayed dead at the end of season 3. But that is more because, for all intents and purposes, the show told us that he was dead, only to unkill him after the fact. My issues weren't that Hopper is alive, but more so that the fake-out nature of his death felt cheap, like a way to have an emotional character death, but without having the consequences that come with it. Overall, I can't help but feel like Eddie's death is a ton of lost potential for the show. The writing was on the wall for a while though, and it felt inevitable that the Grim Reaper would soon knock on his door like it did other one-season wonders in the past. While Max is trying to survive in her mindscape, Lucas is having some problems of his own when Jason shows up. At this point, it is clear that Jason has really lost his mind as he is ready to shoot Lucas. He sees Max in her trance and assumes that it is Lucas's Hellfire cult that is responsible for it. Lucas tries to explain what is actually happening, but Jason is too set in his own beliefs to listen.
You're not listening, just listen. There's no cult. There never was.
You expect me to believe that?
It's the truth.
Then why was Chrissy at Eddie's trailer?
She was buying drugs. Liar!
When Jason asks about Chrissy and Lucas says that she needed help and was buying drugs, Jason doubles down and makes it about himself. He states that he knows Lucas is lying because Chrissy would have come to him if she needed help. But it really feels like if he had been just a little more observant and less focused on himself, then he would have been able to notice that Chrissy was acting odd.
Now, we're gonna try and take away Jason, double team him back is gonna free up Patrick on the left.
Wait, no. You gotta let me take the shot.
I don't think Jason was necessarily a bad person, as from his perspective, he thinks he is avenging Chrissy and eradicating a terrible cult that has been killing people. However, it is the very fact that he refuses to listen to any outside perspective that he puts himself in the villain role, because he makes snap judgments on people and situations and refuses to change his mind about them when presented with new information. It doesn't help that he is basically wrong about everything, and he has such a high sense of self that he takes things into his own hands. Lucas's fight with Jason serves as a perfect conclusion to his arc this season, as he finds himself as the antithesis of the person he admired early on. It's an intense fight between the two. Similar to how Steve is weak to plates to the head, we learn that Lucas is weak to vases. Jason uses this to his advantage and has Lucas on the ropes until Max starts to levitate. Knowing that he doesn't have time to deal with Jason's bullshit any longer, Lucas goes into beast mode and gets the better of him. As the fight is happening, we see Max levitating and her bones slowly start to break. I was huffing some serious hopium at this point, trying to convince myself that Max would be okay. This got harder and harder to do with every time one of her limbs broke. She was just about to get the full Vecna treatment when 11 saves the day again, which sent Max back into her body, which was now broken. It was a super emotional moment as Max is crying, telling Lucas that she can't see or feel anything, that she doesn't want to die and is scared.
I'm so scared, I'm so scared. I want to die, I'm not ready. You're not gonna die, please just hang on. I want to go on, I don't want to.
This moment is so heartbreaking as well as bone-chilling, with both Sadie Sink and Caleb McLaughlin giving amazing performances. As the moment passes, Max is unable to hold on. She dies in Lucas's arms, which opens up the fourth and final gate, sending a massive fissure throughout Hawkins. Jason is claimed as the first victim of this fissure, as it literally rips him apart.
It feels like you got split in two.
This was a great little twist, as for the briefest of moments before Max dies, it feels like they won, albeit at a cost. With 11 excising Vecna's spirit, Nancy shotgunning his ragdoll body, and Max making it back to her body, I didn't think Vecna's plan would succeed. But as the clock strikes that fourth time, we know Max is dead and that the barrier between the worlds is crumbling. This brings us to the 11 of it all, and I have to say I have some mixed feelings on what happens. Max dies. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is an emotionally devastating moment as the entire audience is crying right along with Lucas. And then 11 says no. No, she's not going to let Max die. She touches her chest and seemingly wills Max back to life. Now, I don't want Max to die, but I'm not sure how I feel about 11 using some new power to bring her immediately back to life. I feel like this power is a slippery slope as it has the potential to remove any and all stakes from the show. Like I said earlier, I don't think Stranger Things is a show where a ton of main characters should die along the way. However, similar to how Hopper felt invulnerable this season, I think Eleven's power could translate the same feeling of invulnerability to all the characters. Because if someone dies, my first thought is going to be, why doesn't Eleven just bring them back to life with her powers? I don't dislike the result of Max being alive, but I think Eleven's ability to bring people back from the dead are a can of demo worms that the Duffers should have never opened.
So it's not a, oh, well, you know, a cheat. It's incredibly relevant to 5.
Wow.
That's also not to say that Max's death and rebirth didn't have consequences. In many ways, Max being alive is ultimately a worse fate for her, as all her limbs are broken, she has been blinded, and she is in a coma. Even more, when Eleven searched for her soul, she found nothing, meaning that Max's soul was consumed by Vecna and is in his possession somehow. In Season 5, I think Max is all but guaranteed to wake up, and I think how she wakes up will be a major plot point. I also hope that since she is in a coma and unable to communicate, we will be able to get to see what she wrote in her letters. It would be really interesting to see what she had to say, not to mention likely very sad. Overall, I think Season 4 was an absolutely fantastic season of television, as it is laced with iconic moments, rich character development, and stunning visuals. It brought Stranger Things back into the center of the cultural zeitgeist, and if this most recent season was anything to go by, the 5th and final season is sure to be amazing. I, like so many others, will be eagerly awaiting our final trip to Hawkins, even if it is not for another 2 years.
And so if we can stick the landing, if we can do Season 5, and tell this huge story that remains ahead, but do it in a way that's honest to the heart and the characters, then we've really pulled something off. So stay tuned for what's ahead.
If you made it to this far in the video, I just want to thank you for watching. After my Steve Harrington video, I've had a massive influx of new viewers, so I really hope you all enjoyed this video. Going forward, I plan on still making some Stranger Things videos, but I will also be making a bunch of videos on other TV shows and movies. If you enjoy analysis videos and reviews, along with the occasional more goofy video, I hope you stick around. Thanks again for everything.